I remember the smell of old woody vanilla cake, the cliquet of champagne glasses, and the shaky way Grandpa blew out his candles. He was smiling, almost glowing, surrounded by family and friends who adored him. 90 years. It felt like a milestone, like we were honoring the very roots of our family tree. The house was full, the chatting loud, and for the first time in a while, everything felt good. Then my husband leaned in and whispered something that knocked the breath out of me. We need to leave, right now. Something is very, very wrong. At first, I thought he was joking. Mas maior de genitive fade I just tilted my head, waiting for him to say something like I forgot to feed the dog, I left the stove on. But he didn't. His eyes didn't blink. His jaw was tight. I felt his fingers press into my waist like he was grounding me or maybe himself. What are you talking about? I murmured, trying not to draw attention, but he didn't answer me. Instead, he took a quick glance across the room, then again behind us as if he was checking exits. "Yeah, me serious?" he whispered again, slower this time. "We need to go." My heart started to race, not because I believed him, not yet, but because he believed himself. And my husband, Daniel, is not someone who spooks easily. He is level-headed, almost too irrational at times. The kind of man who reads contracts before signing birthday cards. For him to be whispering warnings in the middle of a family celebration, it didn't make sense. It's true, I pulled him aside, away from the music and the people clinky forks on plates. He's scaring me. Tell me what is going on. He hesitated, which made it worse. Then finally, he said, I saw someone walking who doesn't belong at. No one noticed. No one even looked twice. But me telling you, he doesn't fit. He is watching Grandpa like a hawk. I turned to look, but he grabbed my wrist. Don't be obvious, he said. Just trust me. I laughed, because that is what nervous people do when their brain can't compute the seriousness of a moment. I told him it was probably one of the grandkids' friends, or maybe someone from the retirement center. But then I looked around the room again, really looked, and for a brief second I felt it too. The air seemed heavier, some of the smiles looked forced. And there was something else, something I couldn't name yet, something that made my stomach tighten. I asked Daniel to point the person out to tell me discreetly. He didn't. He just said, he is gone now. But I don't think he left. I know how that sounds. Paranoid, even delusional. But Daniel wasn't acting crazy, he was acting alert. Like someone who'd seen a car coming and didn't have time to explain before pulling you out of the road. I'm not leaving, I said. This is Grandpa's big day. He has been waiting for this all year. Daniel nodded, but his eyes never relaxed. Then stay near me. Don't go upstairs. Don't go outside. Just promise me you'll stay close. The rest of the party blurred together. I tried to act normal. I helped serve cake. I laughed so loudly at jokes he didn't hear. But inside, I kept replaying Daniel's words. Something is very, very wrong. By the end of the night, I noticed Grandpa had grown quieter too. He stopped telling stories halfway through them. At one point, I caught him staring out the window for what felt like a full minute, like he was expecting someone or something. And when he finally catch the cake, his hand trembled more than usual. I wish I could say I dismissed Daniel's warning as nothing more than a moment of anxiety. But deep though, I felt it too, a ripple beneath the surface. Something had shifted, something unseen but undeniable. And it was before we discovered the old photograph tucked under Grandpa's chair. But that is a story for later. The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling. You know how sometimes a moment clings to you not because of what was said, but because of how each imagine your body react. That whisper from Daniel had settled into my skin like a cold draft that wouldn't leave. And now, with the party over, the balloons have deflated in the hallway, I couldn't stop hearing in the night in my mind. That is when I started to see it all differently. The night hadn't been perfect. Not really. There was the way Aunt Karen had spilled wine on herself before dessert and looked genuinely startled when someone asked her if she was okay, like she didn't even realize she did done it. There was the sudden flicker of the lights during Grandpa's speech, a brief, stuttering blackout that no one commented on, even though the power hadn't gone out in the house in years. There was the man who brought the second cake, someone I didn't recognize who slipped from the back and never joined the group. Danielle wasn't the only one seeing ghosts, apparently. I had just been too caught up in the nostalgia to notice. But now that my mind was clear, I remembered something else. The envelope. Just before we gathered in the dining room to sing happy birthday, Grandpa had been sitting alone in his study. That alone was strange. He usually loved being the center of attention. But there he was, back straight in his favorite leather chair, staring at a sealed brown envelope in his hands. He didn't see me watching from the hallway. His thumb ran along the edge of each slowly, like he was building up the courage to open it. But then someone called him to come catch the cake, and he slipped the envelope under his seat cushion like it was something dirty, something dangerous. That same envelope, I would later find. I didn't tell Danielle about it right away. Maybe I didn't want to validate his fear. Maybe I was afraid of what he'd say. But something about Grandpa's body language had burned itself into my memory. Not fear, not guilt, grief. Danielle, for his part, hadn't let it go either. That morning, as we cleaned up the house, he kept glancing at the corners of each room, his eyes scanning places people don't normally look, the top of bookshelves, under rugs, behind doors left slightly ajar. I caught him checking the locks on the windows twice. He was quiet, too. The kind of quiet that isn't passive but intentional, like every word unsaid was a thread in some private theory he wasn't ready to share. At one point, I finally said, "Okay. You need to tell me exactly what you saw." He didn't speak right away, but then he described the man. Said he was tall, overdressed for a birthday party, wearing a wool coat despite the heat. Said his shoes looked expensive, polished to a ridiculous shine. That he never smiled once. And that when their eyes met across the room, the man didn't look away. In fact, he did the opposite. He tilted his head. He smiled, not friendly, but like someone who knows something you don't. He wasn't just watching Grandpa, Danielle said. He was studying him, like a scientist, or a predator. I didn't want to believe it. But then Danielle added something that chilled me to the core. When I tried to get closer, to see if anyone else noticed him, he was gone, just gone, like he slipped through the walls. At that moment, the party felt less like a celebration and more like a stage play where the real drama was happening in the shadows. Grandpa's hesitation, the odd power flicker, the unfamiliar man, the envelope, all pieces of something we didn't yet understand. And suddenly, you wasn't just scared. I was furious, because whatever was happening, Grandpa knew. And he wasn't telling us. So later that afternoon, when no one was watching, I snuck into Grandpa's study. My fingers trembled as I lifted the same seat cushion I had seen him tuck the envelope beneath. And there it was, thick, heavy, unmarked. I didn't open it, not yet, because deep down, I was starting to realize something terrifying. The danger hadn't passed when the party ended. It had only just begun. I held the envelope for hours before I opened it. It sat on my lap like a loaded weapon, silent, dizzy, and humming with potential. Danielle kept asking if I was okay, and I kept lying, saying I was just tired, maybe still buzzing from the party. But the truth was, I wasn't tired. I was rattled, unsettled. The kind of anxious that settles into your bones and doesn't go away, no matter how many times you try to distract yourself. By midnight, I couldn't stand it anymore. Danielle had fallen asleep on the couch, still in his jeans, like he hadn't meant to sleep at all. I crept into the guest room at Grandpa's house, closed the door softly behind me, and finally tore up the envelope. There were photos inside, old ones, black and white, curled at the edges like they'd been handled too many times. They were of people I didn't recognize at first, but then I looked closer. One of them was Grandpa, only much younger, maybe his late 20s, standing next to a man who looked eerily like the one Danielle described. The same slicked hair, the same cold, unreadable eyes, the same tailored, almost to a perfect suit. The photo had no date, no writing, no hint of context, just the two men standing in front of an old government building. I turned over the next photo. This one was a group from any uniform, military, intelligence, indigeniteno, but there was something off about the image. Everyone was smiling except for Grandpa. He looked trapped, haunted. The last item in the envelope was a single sheet of paper with two words written in black ink, he S back. That S when everything shifted. I sat there for a long time, heart pounding, mind spinning, and all I could think was, what have we never been told? My family wasn't flashy. We would eat the type to stir the pot. We had Thanksgiving traditions, overly long group texts, inusual family squabbles, but secrets. Government suits, men who vanish into thin air, that wasn't supposed to be US. Yet, the photos said otherwise. The next morning, I confronted Grandpa. At least, I tried to. He was sitting on the porch, sipping his weak coffee like it was any other Sunday morning, as if he had hidden a ticking chimney bomb beneath the seat cushion of his favorite chair. I didn't even try to ease into it. I just dropped the envelope onto the table in front of him. He didn't flinch. You know him, don't you? I said. The man from the party. He has seen these photos. He was watching you. Danielle saw him. Grandpa didn't look at me. He just stared at the photos for a long time, his mouth pressed into a line. Then, almost inaudibly, he said, I hope to never see him again. Who is he? He looked up at me then. I swear, all my life, I had never seen my grandfather look afraid. He was a hockey, a storyteller, a man who fixed clocks for fun and always carried peppermints in his coat pocket. But that morning, he looked hollowed out. His name is not important, Grandpa said. What matters is what he represents. What he is capable of. E why he is said. I waited, but he didn't continue. I pressed him, demanded answers, but he shut though, said I needed to let it go. That digging into this would only bring danger to everyone. But how could I let it go? When my husband sensed something before it even happened. When Grandpa was clearly hiding from a past that had just knocked on our front door. When I realized that everything I thought I knew about my family, our history, our legacy was only the surface of something deeper, something darker. That day, I started asking questions, quietly, carefully. I talked to your Aunt Karen, who grew patty when I mentioned the name Wallace. I didn't even know where that name had come from, just a word that echoed in my mind after reading those photos. But she knew it. Her face said so. Uncle Rick refused to speak to me at all. Said I was stirring ghosts that had no business being woken. Then I remembered something Grandpa once said when I was little. I had asked why he never talked about his military service. He smiled, he said, some stories only hurt when told. I used to think that was poetic. Now I think it was a warning. Whatever this was, it ran through the veins of my family, buried beneath smiles, birthday candles, and carefully rehearsed silences. If this thing had returned, then we would just dealing with the past. We were about to face everything it left unfinished. It took 3 more days for Grandpa to finally talk. He didn't come to me. I found me his study, the lights off, blinds drawn, sitting in silence like he was waiting for something or someone. The same envelope I had returned to him sat untouched on the table. I thought he might pretend not to know what I was talking about, that he did double down on silence. But when I stepped into the room, he didn't even look up. I knew he did call me back. He said, no hello, no hesitation, just that. Who is he? I asked again, softly this time. He turned his eyes toward me, and I saw something I never thought I'd see in my grandfather as face shame. He was never supposed to leave alive. He didn't speak. He didn't. The words sounded too rehearsed, too final. Grandpa took a shaky breath e began. It started, he said, em 1956. Long before I was born, long before he met Grandma, long before he became the gentle, clock fixie, mint-giving man I knew. He'd been recruited into something called Project August. Not a military operation, not exactly. It was described as a civilian integrated defense initiative, though he later learned it was just a cavar for something far more obscure. They were fighting wars. They were handling anomalies. People, events, things that didn't fit neatly into any box. One of those anomalies was the man Daniel saw. He didn't have a name, or maybe he had to a man. We called him Wallace, but it was just something we picked neutral, forgettable. He wasn't exactly human. Grandpa's voice faltered. At least not in any way that matters. According to Grandpa, Wallace appeared at a site outside of Langley, Virginia during what was supposed to be a routine signal interference investigation. At first, they thought he was a defector. He spoke perfect English, had military credentials, claimed he was there to help. But he knew things, Grandpa whispered, things no one should be known, about us, our families, our fears. He could look at you and tell you the exact day your father died, or your mother's last words. If he touched you, even for a second, you'd lose a memory just gone. At first, they tried to study him, then contain him, then eliminate him, but nothing worked. He always came back, Grandpa said. A new uniform, a new name, a new body, even, but the same eyes. Eventually, the project was shut though. Quietly, everyone involved either disappeared, signed lifetime gag orders, or were relocated under new identities. Grandpa was one of the few who opted for a different route: retirement. Voluntary silence. He promised never to speak his name again. He told me once that he wasn't done with me, that we had unfinished business. I thought he was bluffing, but he waited. All these years. I asked Grandpa what kind of business, what Wallace wanted now. He hesitated, then reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a smaller envelope one he hadn't seen before. Inside was a photograph of me, from last Christmas, standing in the kitchen, laughing. Wallace had circled my face in his ink. I think, Grandpa said slowly, that he has it for you. The room went silent. Even the air seemed to stop moving. I stared at the photo, my own image staring back, unaware, exposed. Why me? I whispered. Why now? Grandpa shook his head. I don't know. But I do know this: he doesn't choose at random. If he has marked you, it means something. Maybe something I did. Maybe something you had. That last part terrified me more than anything. Something I am. Danielle and I left Grandpa's house that night. I packed quickly, trembling. I didn't even say goodbye. But when I got home, there was a notch on our doorstep. Handwritten. No name. You had not safi with him either. No return address. No fingerprints. Just 8 words that shattered any sense of control I had left. Because whoever wrote that notch, they were talking about Grandpa. They were talking about Danielle. I didn't show Danielle the notch. Not right away. I know how that sounds. I know I should have. But after everything Grandpa told me after hearing about Wallace, the missing memories, the photo of me marked like a target, you wasn't sure who to trust anymore. Least of all the man who had first whispered that we needed to leave. The notch felt like a punch to the chest. 8 words, no punctuation, written in uneven handwriting. It was real, too real. The paper was rough, heavy, not fresh. Like it had come from some familiar archive. Like someone had been saving it for years, waiting for the right moment to deliver it. You had not safi with him either. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Daniel's bed, listening to his breathing, wondering how much I really knew about the man I married. I remembered how we met, how quickly he'd clicked with my family, how Grandpa had taken to him faster than any other boyfriend he'd ever introduced. I thought that meant something good, but now you wasn't so sure. The next morning, I took the note to the one person I hoped would still give me answers, Grandpa. But when I arrived at his house, the door was wide open. He was gone. No signs of a struggle, no mess. His slippers by the couch, his coffee mug still half full on the table. His phone, wallet, keys were all untouched. It was like he had just stepped out and never come back. I called the police, of course. They filed a missing persons report, asked questions, took statements. But they didn't understand. They were operating inside a normal world. This wasn't normal. Daniel was quiet when I told him, supportive, but guarded. He asked the right questions, drove me home, made dinner, but something in his eyes had shifted. Or maybe something in mine had. That night, I went through his things. I know that sounds awful, but I needed to know. I dug through drawers, searched his email while he was in the shower, looked for anything, any connection to Wallace, a the envelope, a the note. And then I found it, an old flash drive tucked inside his shaving kit. Password protected. It took me hours to crack using every date I could think of that meant something to him. Nothing worked. Until I tried my birthday. It opened. Inside were dozens of audio recordings, interviews, conversations, field notes, men with my grandfather's voice. Some with names redacted, distorted by static or voice masking. But one thing was clear. Daniel had known about Project August for years. Long before the party, long before me. In one recording, Grandpa said, "She can know." Not yet. Daniel replied, "She'll find out eventually. You know she will. Then God help her when she does." I shut the laptop. It wasn't just the note anymore. It was real. All of it. And I was caught in the center of something decades in the making. I confronted Daniel that night. It didn't even try to be subtle. You knew him, Wallace. You've known all along. He didn't deny it. That's what scared me the most. I was trying to protect you, he said. From him, from your family, from yourself. Myself, you don't understand what this is. What he wants. Then explain it. Daniel stared at me for a long time, then said something I'll never forget. Your grandfather made a deal, years ago. One that involved blood. One that involved you. Before I could say another word, we heard a knock at the door. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. Daniel's face went pale. "Do not open the door," he whispered. But we both knew it was already too late, because the moment we heard those knocks, the lights began to flicker again, just like they did at the party. Somewhere inside my mind, like a whisper not my own, I heard the words, "You always belonged to me." The knocks stopped, not abruptly, not like someone had given up. They faded one by one as if someone was sinking backward into the darkness beyond the door. And then, the house was quiet, except for my heartbeat. Daniel stood perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the door like it was alive. "He has nodded to hurt you," he said finally. "Not yet, but he will be, if we don't stop this." I turned to him, my voice breaking. "Stop what, Daniel? What is this?" And then he told me everything. My grandfather had just been part of Project August. He had been its catalyst. The one who made contact. The one who volunteered a life for peace, for silence, for a future unburdened by chaos. Wallace had not simply appeared out of nowhere. He was invited. The early years of the program had been built around a theory that certain individuals, born under specific patterns, teams, places, conditions acted as conduits for something else. Something ancient, not divine, not demonic, just other. People like my grandfather, people like me. The truth was, Wallace wasn't just observing Grandpa at the party. He had been watching me, testing the bond, waiting for it to mature, for whatever seed had been planted all those decades ago to finally take root. Daniel hadn't just met me by chance. He'd been assigned to watch me, years ago, long before we ever exchanged a word. But somewhere along the way the assignment turned real. He fell in love with me. That's when he began hiding the truth from everyone. That's why I pulled you out of the party, he said. I felt it. He was trying to initiate the transfer. I didn't understand what that meant. Not fully, until I remembered the feeling I had that night, like I was drifting out of my own body. Nike wasn't entirely there. He feeds on memory, Danielle continued. Not just individual ones. Generational memory, legacy, lineage. Your family gave him something he could nest inside. That SYU Hideki. The envelope, the photos, the circle face. It had never been about targeting me for elimination. It was about completion. Grandpa had spent his entire life delaying the inevitable, trying to distract Wallace, mislead him, offer alternate hosts. That's why the family was always so fragmented. Why silence ruled every holiday. Why stories ended in awkward pauses in bitter stares. Every generation, they feared the same thing. That I would be the one chosen. And now, the game was over. That night, I went back to Grandpa's study alone. Danielle begged me not to, but something in me had changed. I wasn't running anymore. I needed to know how this ended. I found one last envelope inside the grandfather clock. It was old, brittle, sealed with wax. My name was written on the front. Inside, there was only a single sentence in Grandpa's handwriting. Don't fight what you are, but never let it define you. Then, underneath it, coordinates. I drove there the next morning. It was a remote clearing in the woods, surrounded by trees older than I could guess. Quiet, still. But when I stepped into the clearing, I felt it there. Not sound, not light, just presence. I was supposed to be there. Not by fate, not by desire, by choice. Mine. Wallace stood waiting. The same face from the photo. Unaged, unchanging, timeless. You came, he said. Yes, I replied, but not to surrender. He tilted his head. The same eerie smile. Then why? Dear Endici. I don't remember the exact moment it happened, only that I closed my eyes and thought of everyone I loved. My grandfather, my mother, even Danielle. Somehow, I felt them all beside me. Not fear, strength. When I opened my eyes, Wallace was gone. No lightning, no fire, just absence, as if he had never existed. Maybe I banished him, maybe he left. Or maybe just maybe he was never real in the way we define real. But whatever he was, he no longer haunted us. I returned home changed. Grandpa never came back, but I found his journal weeks later box under the porch. It was filled with things Yeli never read aloud. Warnings, instructions, one final line scribbled in the back. Sometimes the ones who ruined the party added the ones who saved the family. Danielle I are rebuilding now. Slowly, honestly, there are still shadows. Still unanswered questions. But for the first time, I feel like they remind to answer. If this story gave you chills, imagine what is coming next. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a twist. Every week, we bring you powerful stories with secrets buried deep in endings you want to see coming. If you've ever felt like something wasn't to catch you right at your family gathering, maybe you were onto something. Stick around. Your story might be next.